So this talk was not sort of put together just for today. And in fact, some parts of it you may have seen before. I can't quite remember, but it was part of something else that I was doing related to using the Burnpole 3 color camera, which we shall come to in the latter part of it. But the first part is kind of an introduction to some of the cameras that were becoming important in the period roughly from the 1890s through to the Second World War. This is not all of them, actually. If you look at the books, there are dozens and dozens of them, and some of them were more successful than others. This is a camera used by a guy called, designed and used by Adolf Meter, and it uses plates about 3 by 9 inches, three of them in a slider, as you can see, for quick change. So you mount 3 plates into a special plate holder, and you take 3 pictures, one after the other, which you could probably do fairly quickly within, I don't know, I guess 10 seconds or something like that. And each one, of course, has got its own color filter, the usual red, green, and blue. And you drop the plate holder between exposures, recock the shutter, re-expose. I suspect, and I haven't been into this in detail, but I suspect that it was necessary or desirable, at least, as John pointed out earlier, to use a different exposure for each plate. So it may have taken a little bit longer than 10 seconds because you've got to adjust the aperture or the exposure time, not the aperture. No, that would spoil things. Adjust the exposure time from shot to shot in your 3 shots. And of course, this does mean that you've got to take static subjects, really. Though there was photography of people, but they obviously needed to be told to sit very still because you've got some time. On the other hand, you are taking with one lens from one point of view, which reduces some of the color fringing problems that you would get if you've got objects at different distances, as Timothy found in his experiments. So Meter's camera was used as a basis for a homemade camera isn't quite the word, but a camera based on Meter's design was made by IO4. This guy Sergei Mikhailovich Prokudin-Gorsky, who was commissioned by Tsar Nicholas II to take photographs all over Russia. He managed to, after some negotiation with the royal palace, he managed to persuade the Tsar to fund his project to take photographs of Mother Russia all over. And this took years. I mean, he started in 1907 and finished 1914, 1915, something like that. And then, of course, there was the revolution and there was the war and the revolution, and it all stopped and never restarted. His archive was transferred to the Library of Congress in the USA, where it still is, and it's been the basis of lots of websites and books, and so it's quite widely accessible. And there are some truly fantastic color photographs taken all over Russia by this process. Here's just a couple of them. These are some of the modern reconstructions by the Library of Congress using the same sort of technique that that Timothy described, but obviously with sort of some fairly top grade equipment and hours spent on each image and all the rest of it. Even so, you can see things which are quite fringy, particularly towards the periphery of the pictures. For example, if you look at the one on the right here of the bridge, some of the details in the foreground are definitely not lined up with the main picture in the background. But overall, you can see that they've done a really fantastic job in getting all these compositions. They're all three individual black and white pictures taken through three color filters on that camera that you saw. And the edges are left in deliberately so that you can see, what they've been having to do to line all the pictures up, because as taken, they are not perfectly aligned. And the good picture is always a bit smaller than the picture that you thought you were taking. Anyway, that was, as I say, around just before the First World War. And so, and the quality, if you compare it with at the same time, autochrome was just starting, wasn't it? That started, what, 1907, was it? So autochrome had just become available about this time. And the resolution of autochrome is not as good as what you've got here. So at that time, what Prokudin-Gorsky was doing was definitely top of the range. And so we've now got an interesting period from then up until the Second World War, when there was effectively competition between improvements in films and the processes used on films and plates, and the use of three color cameras, which was almost entirely reserved for more professional users and applications. So there's this guy, Ducos d'Oran, who invented but never built a three color camera. This is the drawing from Coe's book on color photography. Essentially, the light is coming in from the right hand side. There are plates above, below, and then straight through. And he's got three lenses, one for each plate. Now, one of the problems is that with that straight away is that you've got to match the lenses absolutely perfectly if you want any hope of getting a good alignment of your three images. So it's not thought that camera was ever built, but other cameras were being built at that time and messed around with. And the advantage of the principle is that you're taking one picture at one moment. So you've at least eliminated the problem of people, for example, moving between one exposure and the next. Then we get to the Frederick Ives and various cameras, including towards the culmination of his career, the Hycro. This is my Hycro, which doesn't actually have a lens, so I can't take pictures with it. And anyway, John Wade knows a lot more about these, and I'm sure he's going to give us a talk at some point about his Hycro and maybe even take pictures with it. I don't know, but there's a real difficulty with that. And I've stolen from him one illustration of the film pack, the Hycro tri-pack, which immediately shows you how difficult it would be to do an experiment today with a Hycro camera and try and see what you could produce. Because, well, without going through it all in detail, you've got three plates and several filters all packed in a tri-pack. And in the camera, the front plate, which is the blue one, has to hinge down into the bottom of the camera. There's a mechanism in the camera for doing that. And there's a single lens and the camera contains a mirror which drops once it's dropped down front the front plate of the tri-pack. It drops a mirror down above it with a filter, and so you've got two plates at the back of the camera, which have to be sufficiently transparent so that the light can pass through the first plate, the red plate, into the green. Constructing that again at home is probably beyond my patience, but who knows? Somebody might be willing to give it a try. So that was a commercial system of the same sort of period. In fact, even maybe even a little bit earlier than Prokudin-Gorsky was working. But then we get on to the 1920s. This is the Yospe, which is a metal three color mirror based camera from 1924. The Yospe factory had earlier made three color cameras very like meters with a sliding back, and they continue with this model. This was their first single lens three color camera. Then you had about 1932, so a few years later, Bernpol, who made, well, he'd made Meters camera for him, so he was in business constructing cameras of this sort, and came up with this design, which is a one-shot three color camera with plates at quite strange angles in one case. And he made that in two sizes. And I've got an example of the small one, the 9x12. And as a bit later on, as we shall see, I'll talk about how I have taken the odd one or two pictures with that, which is something of a challenge, as you will imagine. But you can see in this picture, you can see the strange angles which are reflected in the external wooden structure, the lens and bellows, and of course you can, because it's a conventional bellows arrangement, you can put different lenses on with different focal lengths, which you can't with all of these things. So we come back to that. Then here's another pattern, Dr. Spencer's Vivex camera. This is complicated. The Vivex system was primarily a three color printing system. That is to say, using trichrome carbro in a commercialized form to make transfer prints of three separate the usual three color negatives, which was capable of making extremely good color prints, for which obviously there was a market. The cameras that were providing the input to that, and this is in the late 1920s, early 1930s, they were using other cameras, including probably the Bernpol. The cameras that they were using were not providing quite as good a registration match when they put all the three layers together as they needed for the quality they were aiming at. And so the Vivex camera, which was at least partly designed by Dr. Spencer and was manufactured by TTH, Taylor Hobson, used pellicle mirrors entirely, so there's no glass thickness to be fighting. And in this case, as you can see from the diagram bottom left there, the three plates were fitted top, back, and on, well, the photographer's right-hand side, our left-hand side as we look at the camera. That's a picture of the Vivex camera. I've never managed to find a decent picture of the Vivex camera. That's obviously copied. It's got a screen, so it's obviously copied from a publication, perhaps by the company that was using it, and one of the main users was Madame Yvonne. Her proper name was Mrs. Middleton, but her trade name was Madame Yvonne, who is there carrying the real thing, the Vivex camera. Now that thing weighs 12 pounds. That is a really heavy camera, and so she's obviously quite a strong woman. Um, and but she was taking fantastically good pictures. I mean, this is only, we're just seeing it here on the screen, but that would have been a 12 by 10 print or something like that of Louis and Countess Edwina Mountbatten of Burma. And you can see every detail in those things. So, and she and a few other people were using the Vivex camera and the Vivex processing system. Actually, I'm not sure whether there ever was more than one Vivex camera, and I haven't seen it. It would be lovely to. Maybe somebody knows where it is. Perhaps it's even got itself into the museum at Bradford. I don't know. Anyway, so that's the early 1930s. Then in 1936, there's this fairly amazing construction which contains, you'll have to sort of look at these pictures and think about it for a minute. Scott Bilotta, who's a Californian collector of all manner of cameras, color multi-plate color cameras, and has been very helpful to me putting together a few bits and pieces like this. The Micut of 1936 uses a prism and three mirrors to somehow contrive to throw the images all onto one plate. The lower center is a diagram of how it works, and if you can make any sense of that, well, you have to spend some time thinking about it. But everything's at strange angles, and even the camera, when as you see from the pictures at the top, when even the camera is a fairly strange shape in order to accommodate the light paths that it includes. And looked at through the front of the lens, bottom right there in this slide, you can actually see the three mirrors, and they contrive to produce three images as expected. Now, Coates' book on color photography, which is a useful one if you haven't seen that, has got printed in the book are these green, red, and blue, black and white images. If you convert those from negatives to positives, I've done that. I scanned the book and I converted them to positives, and I used a Photoshop method, pretty well the same as what Timothy described earlier, to combine them. So what you see on the left-hand side is my combination of those three black and white images, taken on a Micut camera, into a full color image, and it's not totally even in color. And in fact, it is also converted in Coates' book, and they've done a slightly better job than I have. But I thought it would be fun to try directly using the images from the book. So there we are. That's the Micut. And then what is really my favorite, the Spectretta. No, I've never seen one of these. I did once see one for sale fairly recently, for, I don't know, a little under £10,000. This is the company which became Meopta. So Opticotechnos Polesnost SRO Prevov is better known as Meopta. This was patented in 1937, as you see, and there's a diagram of how it works. This is 35mm camera. The feed spool is down here at the bottom. Actually, in the real camera, it's there, which makes more sense because it can make the camera a bit smaller. And then you've got this combined prism, and the light paths combine to bring the filters are there, and there, and the film wraps around like this. Actually, I'm going the wrong way there because the film runs upwards, I think, in the camera. And here, there's the actual camera, which is a splendid and very collectible looking thing. Here's a picture of it inside, and there are the prisms, and there are where the filters are, and you can see the film path runs a very angular way from there to there, and there the filters pulled out, so you can see roughly the densities of the filters that you need using, well, I was going to say modern film, but anyway, film of the 1930s. So it's the 35mm, as you can see. There was prototyping, followed by a first production batch of 50 cameras made in April 1940. And here they are making them. It's wonderful to see the factory in operation. So there's a guy assembling one, a couple of guys assembling cameras, and there's a sort of dismantled illustration of some of the parts. I suppose that long tubular thing in the middle is a viewfinder, because I can't see how it would go inside the camera. The production history is uncertain, even in a long history from which I was able to read from the Meopta archives. There were several versions in the period up to 1942. They were tinkering and experimenting with it. You realise, of course, that there's a war going on at the same time, but they must have been severely distracted by that. But the intention was to start up properly with a batch of 10,000 cameras after the war ended, but it never happened. And probably only 50 to 100. I mean, there were the original 50 and maybe some more were ever made. And really, in a way, that's the end of the story of three-color cameras, because along came Agfacolor and Kodachrome, and you could use an ordinary camera. And at the end of World War II, if chemistry hadn't come along with a reasonably effective subtractive color film, that is to say, a film which was reasonably fine-grained and reasonable in speed, none of which applies to autochrome or Dufay or the other additive processes which had been around a little bit earlier. It would have been wonderful, or it would have been great, very interesting, if cameras like the Spectrator and whatever else might have been invented afterwards had continued to be developed and sold. But it was not to be. Kodachrome, Agfacolor and their successors took over the world, and this is the time when all of this really stopped. So that's the sort of the end of the historical story of three-color cameras. And we go back now to the burn pole. Here's a diagram of the internals of the burn pole. In fact, a couple of different diagrams, one from the patent on the left and one from the burn pole instruction manual on the right, which is a bit simpler to understand. And the one on the right, I mean, they call it the Naturfarben camera, which means natural colors camera. The lens is at the top So we're looking down on the camera from above, and so the light is coming in from the top. The arrows aren't quite in the right positions. Actually, that the end of that should be somewhere like there, I suppose. The mirror the mirrors, there are two mirrors, A and B, which are semi-silvered mirrors and also filters, because they're reflecting some of the light and filtering out other of the light. So X, Y, and Z are the blue, red, and green respectively at their strange angles. And I think from looking at the writing that Bernpohl published, the reason that for the strange angles is to stop spurious reflections flying around inside the camera and producing unwanted partial images on the plates. And you can see, if everything was neatly at 45 and 90 degrees, how that might happen. So that's the purpose of that. But the alignment of all the internals, if you look at the internals, there are tiny little alignment screws which you mustn't touch. Basically, it's set up in the factory, and you better leave it that way, because I think if you ever got it out of alignment, you'd have a real struggle putting it back. Anyway, without trying any realignment, I thought, well, I need to try and take a picture or two with this thing. So here goes. You need a lot of light, so I started out outdoors. So here we have on the left, the camera on a good sturdy tripod, and on the right, some coloured paper and stuck on a board for colour patches for a first trial, looking for things like working out what the exposure should be and how to focus it and so on, which are not such obvious questions. Anyway, that's without any means of actually taking a picture. And there's the camera with it's beautifully made, with all mahogany and brass and polished, and this one's in good condition. It hasn't been battered. The filters stroke plate positions are all covered. So there's a ground glass screen on the green, which is the back of the camera. The other two are covered with wooden shutters, which you take out when you want to put your plate holder into the plate holders, three of them, into the camera. There are plate holders. My camera didn't come with plate holders, but I managed to find some Zeiss Icon plate holders that fitted, but a little bit loose. So I've made packing pieces to fit them so that they fit in snugly. So there are the plate holders in place, and there it is, ready to take a picture with the shutters all pulled up. The lens on the front of the camera is not the original lens. It came with the camera, but it clearly wasn't the original lens. It wasn't fitted anything like up to Bernpohl standards. But it's fine, because with a Bernpohl you can put different lenses with different focal lenses in. That's one of the advantages of the design. So that's the lens in that is anti-coma, so it was from a plowable camera of some sort initially. So having done a bit of outdoor experimentation, I thought, well, I really need to have more controlled conditions. So I made an indoor setup with as many colours as I could quickly find in view, and so that's a picture of it with a normal digital camera. And I set it up, and that's just under ordinary lighting. But I set it up for actually using the Bernpohl. I set it up with two big powerful studio flashes, one each side of the camera. One each side of the scene, so as to have a large amount of light and therefore a reasonably short shutter speed. Of course, like all of these three color cameras, you've got one lens which is good, and it's really critical that you have in the design of the camera all the path lengths equals, because you need all three plates to have the same. They all need to be in focus with the same setting of the lens, so they've got to be in focus simultaneously, and they've also got to be the same size. The images have to be the same size simultaneously if you're ever going to expect to be able to assemble a color picture out of the resulting negatives. So there's the setup, and there are the three resulting pictures, marked by these. You see the little triangles on the side, the little notches, so you can tell which is red, green, and blue, because those correspond to the three plate holders that are fitted into their three slots. I had to do quite a bit of fine tuning to the camera to deal with light leaks, which were due to the plate holders not at first fitting perfectly enough. That was fixed. Testing exposures using paper negatives and so on. You might suppose that the exposure of 3 times the measured value would be sufficient, because after all, the light is being divided into 3 different paths. But of course, there are also filters in the way, and various inefficiencies. And reading the Burnpole manual and then my trials of my own show that it's much less efficient than that. And the nominal 200 ASA film needs to be rated at about 4 ASA to get a decent exposure on the 3 plates. And that makes focusing pretty difficult as well, because it's a normal field camera in effect. You have to put a ground glass screen and a dark cloth and focus it by moving the lens backwards and forwards in the usual way, and actually seeing what you're doing is extremely difficult. Now, it was quite a popular camera with professionals. This most of Burnpole's outfit apparently went to the USA, mainly to studios producing luxury advertisements. So you're talking about static scenes, but looking for very high quality. And the 3 negatives could be used directly to produce printing plates for whatever printing method you were going to use, probably lithography. Like Timothy, I then imported the 3 images into the computer. I was using Affinity Photo for this rather than Photoshop. When Adobe started charging a monthly subscription to use Photoshop, I abandoned Photoshop and shifted to Affinity Photo, which has got all the same capabilities and works in a similar but not identical way. So this was done in Affinity. It's a good idea to include, if you can, a grayscale in the picture to help you with getting the colors balanced. You need to obviously process the film, do the initial scans, preferably all as one big scan on the scanner so that they're all scanned in the same conditions. Import them as what's called a live stack with alignment, so that the software itself will make fine adjustments if necessary, to the size of the image and to the alignment, so that they're all aligned over one another. This is a feature normally used for doing HDR photography, but we can use it for this as well. and then, as Timothy did, transfer the three pixel images into the three color channels, which you can then work on as separate color channels. The result is here. That's the digital camera image once again on the left, compared with the burn pole image on the right of the same scene. Now, the burn pole image is not as in focus, and I'm not quite sure where all that goes astray, but it is probably something to do with the alignment, the exact alignment of the three plates. And then there's the question of the colors, which on the whole aren't too bad, but they're not the same everywhere. If you look at the three boxes of film right in the middle, well, the Ilford and the Kodak, the lower Ilford and the Kodak, have come out reasonably well, and the yellows are working okay. But the green of the top Ilford one is very different in the two renderings, and in other places too, you'll see that the color rendering is reminiscent, shall we say, but not the same. Now, the thing here is that this is just one interpretation, and once it's in a computer, you've got probably even more flexibility than they had in the days of the Vivex process. You can control the whole spectral behavior and brightness and contrast of each of the three layers separately, as you combine them. So this is an interpretation, but it's just one of many possible interpretations of that set of three black and white images. So that's it, really. I mean, I did take a few others. I just show you this one because it was the best one. But the others actually could be made to behave in a similar way. There is more on the blog on my website. Look on the September 2020 section of the blog page at www.refracted.net, and you can see more detail of the burn pole experiment.